They are idiots. Idiots who don't want to participate in the affairs of their nation. They think things will just work in and of themselves. Throughout the ages, societies have changed because of the enthusiasm and the agitation of young people. That is the lesson of history. And if you ignore that, any society that ignores that truism is a society that is in danger, because young people are indeed the engine of every society. It is young people who have the energy and the vigor. It is young people who are the defenders of their societies. It is young people who provide the energy that is the driving force of the industries or even agriculture of the society. And if young people are made hopeless, then they become dangerous, because in their hopelessness, they want change. And when they see certain individuals or groups of individuals are standing in the way of the change that they desire, their only agenda will be to remove such people, in the hope that by removing them, then they'll create a new order and a new dispensation that will restore hope. That is why you cannot ignore young people. I remember in different societies, there have always been different statements about the value of young people, whether you are talking about Africa. In African tradition or African societies, there were methods and systems of training youth to be responsible. In different societies, there are different ways of ensuring that young people are given the hope that when they become adults, then they will inherit societies that are going to sustain their own children, because life is intergenerational. Life is a relay race. And my message is, ignore young people at your own peril. If you ignore them, then they'll create disorder. And when they create disorder, then the society will be turned upside down. And if the society is turned upside down, then it takes generations to restore it. But if you listen to the well-meaning voices of young people, then you will change society in a positive way. And there is evidence in different societies across the world. It is dangerous to give a sweeping answer to the question of what happened in the United States of America, but what one can say is that the American society has its complexities. The access to guns is very easy in the United States, and they trace it to their history. And when you have young people who are dejected, young people who have resentment to society, then sometimes they can misuse weapons in the manner that we saw happened in the United States of America. The little evidence that we have tells us that this young man who was involved, is he called Crooks, who was involved in this attempted assassination, has a history of sorts, and we are not able from the armchairs that we sit on to really give an objective, comprehensive assessment of the circumstances, but it calls into question who should have access to guns. But that, of course, does not even begin to answer the question. I think what we can do for our purpose is to tell ourselves that if you allow access to guns and it's available to certain types of people, then you expose yourself to danger. But remember, there is nothing like perfect security anywhere in the world. We have seen over the years attempted assassinations or assassinations, and in many cases, there have been young people who want to change society. Sometimes they are young people who believe they can change the society, and they want to eliminate people who they think stand in the way of such change. That is the best that one can do, but one must warn oneself that one is talking from a position of lack of all the evidence and all the information relating to that particular situation. When we started in Kenya talking about the generation Z, I asked a young person, do you actually know when this classification started? And I told the young man, I want you to go and read a book by an American psychologist called Jean-Marie Tweng, who was given the categorization from the silent generation to the baby boomers, then to the X, then to the millennials, then to the generation Z, who are now called the Zoomers. And this is an attempt to understand societies. And the reality is, there was a time when, because information was controlled, when if you wanted any kind of information, the only source of information was a newspaper. The only source of information was a national broadcaster, which was not even open 24 hours. It would be open for 4 hours during the day. And one can say that the amount and quality of information that was available to certain people in the society in those early days was very restricted. Then there was what one may call a dramatic change in the world, with the coming into being of internet, with the coming into being of what is social media, the Instagram, the Google, all these media that is now available to us, so that instantaneously what happens in one part of the world is made known to a person in a totally different part of the world. And this abundance of information and the ease with which this information is accessed has created a gap in the thinking of the generation, because the society still has those who may be described as the boomers, if you use that classification. It has those who they call the X's and the millennials, and you have these Zoomers who are very impatient. They think they know more than you do, and yet you think they don't know. And that creates an intergenerational conflict. But it's also important to know that even as we talk about the Zoomers in any country, we must also remind ourselves that in quite a number of countries, there are young people in the same age bracket who do not have access to that kind of information. So the society finds itself in an environment of contradiction. And when a society finds itself in an environment where there is contradiction, if there are no forums for mediation, then it generates conflicts. And this is what we begin to see as manifesting itself through protest. And that protest sometimes spills over into the streets. But if you care to read what happens in the social media, there is always some kind of protest going on in the social media, which does not necessarily spill over into the streets. And every society is now being called upon to begin to react and to think, how are we going to deal with this new environment? It is the reality today in Kenya and in different countries of the world, in Africa, that a decision is made by a government official, and the decision is put in writing and is stamped confidential. Within a few minutes, the confidential document is all over in the social media. So that there is nothing confidential. What you think is confidential is now in the public domain. The thing that we call official secrecy is no longer there. And these are generating conflicts which, if not mediated properly, then can spill over in a dangerous way. But if they are anticipated and dealt with in a positive manner, in a manner that engages these individuals who are in this space, who are of a different generation, then it can help drive the nations. Africa finds herself in a more interesting, one can say even dangerous situation. And that is also true of Asia. If you look at recent census and you look at the percentage of young people below the age of 35, it is almost 70% of the population. If you look at people who are above the age of 65 in many countries in Africa, is less than 5%. So these are demographics that think very differently, behave very differently, and yet they must live together in this one society. How do you deal with it? These are the questions that we must now begin to ask ourselves. And governing countries is going to be very difficult in the future. What we see now is something that the world has never seen before, where everybody is a journalist, where everybody can Google or contact Professor Google, and Professor Google will tell you everything that you want to know. This is the environment in which we find ourselves as countries, as societies, and the question is, are we prepared? And if you are not prepared, the answer is you had better be prepared. And the other question is, can you be prepared enough, even if you want to prepare? Because the dynamics are changing by the day. So it is not going to be easy. It is not going to be for the faint-hearted. It's going to require intellectual agility so that you deal with this new scenario, because it will only going to grow more complex as days go by. I've never been one who simply says, because you are young, therefore you must lead. I think that is not the way to look at it, because youth in and of itself is not the answer. It is ideas. But yet it is also true that societies must have a system where older people give room for younger people to serve. And what has been emerging in the areas that you've talked about in the Sahelian region, you are talking about countries such as Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea, and even Chad to a certain extent, is that the ballot has disappointed the people. The ballot, it appears, has been rigged so that those who are in charge of the ballot have ensured that they are always able to get the result that they desire, and these results are always producing the same type of people, and these same type of people keep on doing things in the same way, and as long as they continue doing things in the same way, the quality of people's lives is never changing in the manner that is desirable. The societies become poorer and poorer. And the young men who emerge from the military are therefore saying, or are saying, that we are tired. We cannot continue to be governed in this way. And for that reason, we are intervening. We are intervening to disrupt this method, because we know that if we don't eliminate these individuals now, it will always be musical chairs. It will always be the same faces saying different things and taking charge of our affairs and misleading us. And the Sahelians are saying, the game is over. We are going to do things differently, and we are going to redefine who we relate with and how we relate with those people, and we are going to change the society so that our ideas are given the opportunity to blossom. The jury is still out as to whether that experiment is going to work. But the rhetoric as it is now is right. When I listen to Traore in Burkina Faso saying the right things, doing the right things, when I listen to the president of Niger, I hear him doing the right things, saying the right thing. When I listen to the military leader in Gabon, I hear him saying the right thing, the same things in Guinea. But the question is, can this be sustained, and sustained in a manner that is going to guarantee that the voice of the voiceless is going to be heard in a sustained manner? Remember that youth is not a permanent stage or a permanent state. Those who are young today will also grow old. So it is the culture of ensuring that there is a movement of ideas from generation to generation that is going to be the true guarantor of sustained change in the society. I think, particularly in Africa, the reason why older people in political power continue to behave the way they do is because power in Africa gives you access to everything. It gives you access to wealth, which you don't have to work for. It gives you access to power, which makes you a demigod. It makes you think that you are larger than life, almost as large as death. It makes you do everything and anything you want, and you begin to forget your past. You begin to forget that you are once young. You begin to forget that you need energy in order to serve. You begin to forget that you are in a position of trust. You begin to forget that you are a servant, and you begin to think that you are indeed the owner of the countries that you are supposed to serve. And you then begin to look at those who are calling for change as your enemies. And because those who are calling for change happen to be young, you then think that the young people are your enemies. And you then begin to think that they are ignorant. You then begin to think that they do not know what they want, and that you are the person who has the monopoly of knowledge and wisdom, and that you can give portions of it as you deem fit. You live in a world of your own, a world of make-believe, a world where you are all-knowing and everybody is a fool. You live in a fool's paradise. That is what happens to those old people, particularly when they have power and money, and they forget themselves. They suffer from what I call selective amnesia. It is a result of a selfish mind. It's a result of megalomania. It's a result of people whose minds are dominated by narcissism. They are narcissistic. They believe that they are the alpha and omega. They believe that they are it. And it is a product of greed. It is a human problem. It is a human problem, but it varies in its extent and depth from society to society. If you look at every society and you look at their history, you will always find that there were people who believed. Is it King Louis the 13th in France, or Louis the 15th, when he was asked, what is the state? He said, l'état c'est moi. I am the state. And you will look at throughout history, throughout the world, whether it's in Europe or Asia or anywhere in the world, leaders who believed that they were demigods, and that is why wars have been fought. That is why monarchs have been killed throughout the ages. That is why those in positions of leadership have been killed. So the problem is a human problem, and it's only humans who can solve it, and humans being solve it by being aware and by being clear of what they want and making demands of what they want. Because those in positions of leadership also have the sense of self-preservation. When they are scared sufficiently, then they concede. They concede in order to survive. Some would tell you that sometimes we don't even elect them. They just rig the system and then we declare them elected. But there is also something that happens, particularly in many African countries, is that when we are called upon to vote, we vote for the wrong reasons. In multi-ethnic African countries, people vote individuals because they are from their ethnic group, or they vote people because they have been bribed. When you vote people for the wrong reasons, then you end up with the wrong people. And when you vote people because of their ability to deliver, then you have men and women who can deliver. So it is important that people are also educated about the vote. Why are you voting? Why are you voting an individual A and not an individual B? Why are you voting somebody who is known to make promises that he or she can deliver simply because they come from your tribe? And as I said a little earlier, in Greek history, and there was this categorization which is important to repeat again, they are idiots. Idiots who don't want to participate in the affairs of their nation. They think things will just work in and of themselves. Then they are tribalists. And these tribalists, they think that they are only safe with people who are from their tribe. And tribe can mean people from the same culture, same language, or same culture. Then they are citizens. These are individuals who are responsible and know that when you want to be served, you must give those who have the desire and the intellectual capacity to serve you. In many societies, it is only a small percentage of people that can be called citizens, not more than 5%. And if a society wants to grow in the right direction, civic education is what will help the idiot and the tribalist to become a citizen. That is why we must invest in civic education, to change the idiot to begin thinking properly, to change the tribalist to begin thinking properly. And once they begin thinking properly, they become good citizens, then the ballot makes sense. In many African countries, the ballot does not make sense because it produces individuals that you cannot recognize. Yet, we have elected them and we are stuck with them. And once we are stuck with them, they do the wrong things and we suffer the consequences. And then we start complaining again the day after the election. And then when an election comes again, then we elect them because we are idiots and tribalists. Then another election comes and then we elect them and we complain again. Then in many African countries now we begin to pray and fast, waiting for God to come and salvage ourselves from ourselves. Identity, you can never deny identity. You can never deny that people want to identify, particularly when people have been downtrodden for a long time, they have been denied opportunity for a long time, then they believe that one of their own will give the thing that the other one could not. And that is something that is very difficult to fight, that birds of the same feather will flock together. But there comes a time that you begin to realize that the mere fact that somebody is of your same ethnic group or from the same language is not necessarily the answer. So the reason why you see that kind of reaction is because it is a byproduct or indeed a product of long periods of denial and exclusion. But once exclusion becomes something that is not the norm, then people will look at character much more than skin color or ethnic extraction. But for the moment in the United States that you've talked about, the thing that are playing out is there's never been an American woman who has been a president, so people are saying, we simply want to create history. There are some who are saying, yes, a black woman, or some are saying, but she's Asian, some are saying, but she's Jamaican. So those are things that are going to play out. And they play out not only in the United States of America, we saw it playing out even in the United Kingdom when their Prime Minister Rishi Sunak became the Prime Minister and is of Indian extraction. And we have seen that even in different parts of Africa. I remember at one time in Zambia when the Vice President was white, people said the same thing. So it is not something that is unique to any society. It happens in places where there are minorities and in places where people feel excluded. He or she is a leader, he or she who knows that leadership is about service. And that service requires humility. And that service requires sacrifice. And that service requires dedication. And it is only for a time, and that you must know when to leave the stage. That is the kind of leader or the kind of leaders that we need. Those who think that leadership is about manipulating processes and manipulating people and occupying positions for personal benefit, those are not leaders, those are misleaders. Those who think that they are demigods to tell people what to do and to guide people what to do and to treat people as if they are objects who don't think. Those are misleaders who do not deserve any respect and do not deserve to be given the opportunity to serve. Unfortunately, we have no shortage of them in this part of the world to mean Africa.